Welcome to the Awakened Goddess Show, your source for inspiration, wisdom, and personal discovery. The place to learn from a diverse mix of mentors, metaphysical experts, spiritual leaders, and best-selling authors from around the world. I'm your host, Angela Wilkinson. Join me as I explore the minds of my masterful guests while they share powerful insights and easy-to-use tools you can start using right away. Now, let's tap into the energy of the Awakened Goddess and be enlightened by today's guest. Melissa Joy Jonsson, affectionately known as M-Joy, is an author, speaker, inspirational leader, and founder and instructor of M-Joy Seminars. She's best known for her ability to engage people from all over the world to embrace their true authentic power and intuition by playing in the field of the heart. Melissa has taught popular life transformational matrix energetic seminars around the globe since 2008. In 2014, she launched the M-Joy Seminar Teachings, a unifying We movement in consciousness dedicated to heart-centered awareness and practical personal empowerment for everyone. Melissa's teachings are a culmination of her expansive work integrating cutting-edge scientific principles and spiritual concepts into practical daily experiences. She provides a new language to experience self-love as integrity. Now let's welcome Melissa Joy to the show. Hi, I'm Angela Wilkinson, and welcome to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show, where we co-create powerful, conscious conversations on the leading edge. Today I have Melissa Joy joining us to talk about heart-centered awareness, self-love, and most importantly, integrity. So welcome, Melissa Joy.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today.
You know what? I had the pleasure of getting all of your books. Melissa Joy has written 3 books, and she was so gracious to send them to me. So we have the little book of big potentials and practical play with the heart-centered way. And today we're focusing on the integrity effect. And I tell you, I have just been devouring this book. And what I noticed about your writing, you are very poetic. And you're also very heady, which I love because I totally am a heady kind of girl. So I'm looking forward to diving into this. So thinking back in my own life about integrity, when I was in my early 20s, if you were asked to ask me what my values were, integrity was like one of the big ones, right? But looking back now, I don't think I actually knew what that really meant. So in your words, can you tell us, what does it mean to be in integrity?
Well, that's a great way to start off the interview. And I'd like to preface my response with acknowledging that integrity is something that is deeply personal to everyone. And so my description or my definition of integrity doesn't need to match your definition or even the definition of the collective in order for it to be true. I think you've already essentially answered the question by virtue of acknowledging that when you were younger, you aspired to be in integrity, but you weren't really sure what that meant. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, we buy into societal's expectations or the cultural norms or these fields of information that tell us the way that we need to be. I mean, think about religion itself, a very giant field that is kind of conditioning people to be good, which you could say might be a facet of integrity. That is not at all what I am referring to when I talk about integrity. Integrity to me is a deep, abiding connection to the field of our heart, and really it's an opening into our own unique soul signature. So living in integrity it's living from the heart and living from a space of trusting and intuition and authenticity such that you become your own inner compass and your own GPS for navigating an extraordinary life. So integrity is not an external standard that kind of constantly eludes us, and it's not some fulcrum that we need to move toward in order to be better than how we are right now. Integrity is something that's innate to everyone. And when we allow ourselves to strip down the programming that we've bought into and lift our perceptual filters, then integrity as authenticity, integrity as joy, integrity as true authentic power naturally emerges. So one of the reasons that I wrote The Integrity Effect is to not only give people access points to tapping into their own innate integrity, but to also plant seeds that the essence of integrity, while we can't yet measure it with our scientific tools, like almost like love, we can't really measure love, but we all know what love is. There is a physics to integrity, just like there's a physics to consciousness, and that consciousness has physics. And that physics is mapped throughout the book, because when we are living in integrity, we are coherent and we are congruent, and that creates certain geometries that play out as form, matter, and experience. So integrity is everything, and it doesn't require an intellectual, or as you said, a heady understanding in order to experience it. In fact, the experience can bring forth an understanding, and that experience is inside of all of us waiting to come out.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and that heady piece, right? I lived most of my early years in my head, really disassociated from my own feelings. Like you would have asked me, "Oh, how do you feel?" I have no idea. And so I love that you talk about this, because really, this is you have to drop into your heart to feel the piece of integrity, right? Like you can't figure your way out of being more in integrity.
Well, anytime you're using the mind, and don't get me wrong, the mind, the intellect, it's absolutely useful. And I love the mind. It's how we can implement the true callings of our heart. But when we're leading from the mind will filter, it will segregate, it will compartmentalize, and it will access based on prior experiences. So if you're trying to figure out something from your head, you're basically sorting through an antiquated filing cabinet based on your prior experiences. And if you've moved away from recognizing that integrity is within you, you'll never find it. So I love the mind, but leading with the mind is leading with limitation and segregation and disconnection, whereas leading from the heart it's leading from completion based on connection and the totality of the essence of our own innate limitless potential.
Mm-hmm. So you talk about placeholders in the book. How does that relate to how we limit ourselves? What is a placeholder?
Well,
How would you describe that?
a placeholder is it's any pattern of information that we are resonating with in our personal perspective reality. So more simply stated, it may be a problem, it may be a condition, it may be a so-called perceived limitation. Whenever we're relating to something as a problem, or we're relating to something as a disease or a limitation, that label literally puts very limiting parameters on limitless potential. It squeezes it into a very rigid container, and nothing else becomes available. One of the beautiful things about playing with placeholders in the holo framework of the MJOY teachings is that what once might have a charge, what once might be something that we think is a permanent fixture in our environment, suddenly it becomes fluid, and suddenly it becomes literally a springboard for creating a trajectory into something different. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's say that you have a disease. And I'm going to use disease because a disease is just literally anything that's creating the so-called perceived absence of well-being. As long as you're relating to that disease as a disease, it's going to be subjected to all of the parameters that are in that particular corresponding morphic field. There's not going to be a lot of freedom for it to change. When you begin to interact with your patterns as placeholders, they literally no longer hold the same place in your reality. It's not something you have to go up against to fix. It's not something that you have to try to get rid of. In fact, a placeholder becomes something that you can integrate into your life. And in the integrative process, it begins to dissolve and evolve into something different. There's actually a physics behind it, and it's not as complicated as it sounds. Where else placeholders are really useful from the angle that you asked the question of a limitation is that a lot of times we will look at our limitations and we will think, okay, this is something that I need to overcome. And we think a limitation is something that's separate from ourselves, or the limitation may define us. When a limitation becomes a placeholder, we are able to relate to the pattern from a holo framework of completion. And then that placeholder literally becomes like a step into moving into something different. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yes. Can we bring it down a little bit more concrete, like with an example? Like for money, let's talk about money for an example.
Yeah.
Because everybody can relate to that, right?
Right. So a lot of times people will relate to money from a holo framework of lack.
Right.
I don't have any money. I need more money. What we don't often realize is that an abundance of lack is still abundance. It's just an abundance of what we don't necessarily really want. So what I often teach students and clients to do is to begin to relate to the so-called money problem as a placeholder. In other words, if this pattern of information isn't really about money, because it's never really about money, how might this placeholder be showing up in your life to reflect back some aspect of perhaps self-love or not loving self that you haven't recognized? And so the placeholder almost serves as a mirror for beginning to recognize where we may not be resonating in abundance, because money is never about money. It's usually about the emotional programming, the conditioning, and the perceptual filters that we've been running in relation to money. And when we begin to play with it as a placeholder, then we suddenly begin to realize that it never was what we thought it was about, and it can begin to change when we change the way we relate to it. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. So in the book, you talk about schematic filters. So this idea of that we are only going to see what we already believe. And
well, it almost goes further than we only see what we believe, because most of our schematic filters are unconscious. In other words, we're not even aware that we're wearing these blurry goggles. We think that's just simply the way things are. And so one of the things that I teach in the MJOY teachings in relation to placeholders is clearing the filters. And one of the advantages of dropping into the field of the heart and allowing yourself to access heart-centered awareness is that you bypass the filters, the filters around not being good enough, not deserving. Maybe you grew up in an environment where money was a placeholder for power, where that money was equated with love. And so you formed all these associative references or associated filters that love and money go hand in hand. And maybe there was a part of you that was not in integrity with that. And so therefore you've been sort of in a push-pull relationship with money, because money shouldn't equal love. What is at the heart of the MJOY teachings is recognizing that in many ways we are all addicted to distractions. We are all addicted to placeholders. And in many ways, we're addicted to our schematic filters. We are addicted to the blurry lenses that we wear that enable us to navigate through reality. And whether we're conscious of it or not, there's always a part of ourselves that is acutely aware that the way we feel within ourselves doesn't necessarily match the situations and circumstances that we're experiencing without. And the integrity effect closes that gap. And when we
Mhm.
close the gap, that's when we are able to fully live authentically and to experience the joy of being, and really to experience the essence of the sacred feminine, which is connection. It's not even really about gender, it's about connection. And
Mhm.
connection is everything.
It is. It is. And I love how you describe the goggles or the glasses, the blurry glasses, and how we can get so attached to this viewpoint, and how we have these blinders on that doesn't allow us to see what may be reality. Like, we have this idea of what we think reality is, but that's not necessarily the truth of it, right?
Well, it's so interesting when we talk about truth. Okay, I
I
would
know,
say,
that's
okay,
so
maybe
subjective.
the only truth is that there isn't any, or the only truth is, yes, we are all one, and in that unity there are infinite distinctions and expressions and perspectives that can express in any given moment. And so we can never really know reality. We can only know reality through how we perceive reality. So our
Mhm.
perceptions, our subjective perceptions, become the mechanism or the lens for which we relate to reality. And so, but there's power in knowing that. It's not something that, oh, shoot, I'm never going to really know what's true, so I might as well just stay home and watch Dancing with the Stars. It's really about recognizing that there's this diverse tapestry of an interconnected, ever expanding conscious universe that we are fundamentally a part of. And every single portion of that pattern matters, and every single unique individual matters. And when we honor our unique, true, authentic soul signature, and we allow for authenticity and integrity to emerge, well, then we're able to fulfill really a facet of our life purpose, which is to show the universe something that it's never seen before, and yet it recognizes through its own symmetric reflection. So it's not really about rebelling against, but it's recognizing that there's a reality so complex, and
Yeah.
there's so many different choice points that are happening simultaneously that are interwoven. I talk about reality being a hologram, and I map out the science of consciousness in one of the books that you showed, Little Book of Big Potentials. I didn't include that science in the integrity effect, although
Mhm.
it's encoded within every word of the book. But one of the characteristics of a holographic system is that if you change one point of reference in the system, that one change affects the entire system. And we as individuals and we as a collective are holonomic in nature. And so each time one individual makes a change within themselves, that affects the entire system. There's a whole physics behind how this happens, and it's incredibly empowering because it's the same physics as the field of the heart. And we don't have to
Mhm.
understand the physics. All we have to do is open into what's already within us, and then recognize that maybe today I'm wearing yellow glasses, and maybe tomorrow I'm wearing blue glasses, and maybe the next day I don't want to wear any glasses at all, and I want to see what I notice. And there's great joy in opening into even realizing that the way you've constructed your reality may not necessarily be true. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means more is available.
Wow. I would just love to take off my glasses. How do we do that? I mean, because it seems like if there are other realities, and I've had moments of clarity, right, of different experiences, but I am not necessarily able to maintain it, right? So I'll take off my blurry glasses and I'll see more with more clarity of maybe the reality I want to see. But then I go back into those, maybe it's the addiction of the story. Is that what's going on?
Well, I would say that's one way that you could describe it. So I'm curious for you,
Yeah.
when you metaphorically take off your glasses, or I like to say, put on the organic Windex and clear the blurry windows as you've been navigating through life, what is the experience for you when you're off with the filters? What do you notice? How do you know that's the reality you want to occupy?
Well, because I'm full of excitement and passion and like I feel aligned and like my the hair on my arms stand up and I'm just like, woo!
So those truth bumps, as I like to refer to them, rather than goosebumps, because we're not geese, those truth bumps and that feeling excitement and that state of expansion, and your whole field literally lights up. That's a reflection of our natural state. That's a state of joy. And so we could follow a story that says, oh, it's not possible to consistently be in a state of joy because life is meant to be an experience of contrast so that your soul can learn all the lessons that it came to learn, including how to suffer. I think even that is perhaps an old story.
Sure.
And so, to more directly answer your question, it's a play in progress. And I say play in progress because I don't think it's something that you need to work at, or else it'll just be another program that becomes a placeholder that's constantly something that's outside of your reach. Joy is within you. This natural state of feeling excited, this natural state of feeling connected, when you say off with the blurry goggles, or off with the filters, or off with the lampshades, as I like to say, when we embody our own light. Once you have a singular reference for that, that reference is forever available in your hologram. And when you connect to a reference and you embody a state consistently, that consistent succession of access points creates a template for a new reality. So more simply stated, what I'm saying is it kind of takes a little bit of practical play where you access the expanded state, your glasses are off, and then you go into a corporate board meeting, or you have to go to the bank, and all of a sudden you've got another mask or a persona or glasses on because you've stepped into a role to behave according to the script or the map that you think you have to follow. And so paying attention with that is incredibly useful. This is where the concept of placeholders really comes in, because whatever takes us out of that natural state, whatever takes us out of our joy, and whatever takes us out of our hearts becomes the placeholder. It becomes a placeholder that can instantly, or over the course of time, transform into a grace holder. And so a lot of times I will teach students, it's not about accessing your bliss and your joy and then completely living in oblivion and watching Dancing with the Stars. Sometimes people, particularly in the New Age community, get all hung up on these notions of love and light, and then they abrogate all responsibility of going out and interacting with the collective. And it's not about that. It's about being able to be in relation to absolutely everything. And it's key to notice what takes us out of our center, what takes us out of our hearts. And when we recognize that, then we are employed with the power of choice. Until we realize, oh my gosh, I just left my house of consciousness because I'm over spiraling in a vortex of what so-and-so thinks of me, we've given away our power. Once we recognize that, that placeholder can transcend into a grace holder, and we don't have to navigate in precisely the same way ever again. And so it can change everything. I for whatever reason, I'm reminded kind of a silly story, but it's very profound in that a woman came to, actually two stories are coming to mind, so I'll just throw them out there as like, what might this look like? But it's the little successive changes that create these magnanimous shifts in our reality. So a woman came to the MJoy Women's Seminar. I teach two seminars, a women's seminar, which is just for women, and then the integrative seminar, which is for women and men. And a woman came, she was in her late 30s. She came to the women's seminar on the East Coast and had some great experiences. We play in a series of fields that enable us to access our true authentic power, our sense of completion, our true authentic self, and our own inherent awesomeness. It's just a lot of fun. So she had a great time at the seminar and felt very, very different, but wasn't quite sure what that might look like once she left the seminar and went back to so-called everyday life. Well, as she was driving home from the seminar, she looked at the gas gauge on her car, and she noticed that she was really low. She was almost at empty. And normally she would kind of panic when that would happen, and she would try to go a little bit further so she could get to the gas station closer to her home, because it was a familiar reference for her. She had a map and a schema for how to fill up at that gas station. So she pulled over on an unfamiliar road, went to a strange gas station. That's not the big deal. The big deal for her was that for the very first time since she had a driver's license, she'd been driving since she was 16, so a couple decades, she actually filled up the gas tank on her own rather than going to find an attendant. Now, you might think, oh, so how's that really going to play out as something different? That was so different for her, where she didn't feel the usual fear and trepidation and insecurity about just something somewhat innocuous, but necessary in order to function in her life. Another woman at that same seminar, following the seminar, said that she went out to dinner by herself for the very first time. She'd flown from Japan, and culturally in Japan, that's just not something that you really do. And she went out to dinner, and she said she had the best time kind of being her own best friend and not worried about what people were thinking. In fact, she wasn't even aware of anyone else being around her. And I said to her when she wrote in, well, no one was really aware of you either. I mean, I hate to say that, but people are so stuck in their own heads with their own stories. They're not really paying attention to what's happening around them. And so these shifts can look like being empowered to go somewhere on your own, or it can look like a lifelong drinking problem, stopping cold turkey overnight, or it can look like a polio limp disappearing after 30 years of one leg being longer than another. The changes aren't limited to physical, mental, emotional, financial, relational. The changes are actually holonomic. And when we begin to play holonomically from a state of completion, then that ripples out in completion, with completion, into absolutely everything.
That's so juicy.
I love placeholders because it's an ongoing process. Somebody once asked me, is it ever possible to get rid of all your placeholders? And I'm like, well, anything's possible. However, that's not really the goal. I would say if there is a goal, the goal is to recognize the value of placeholders and how almost instantly they can transform into grace holders and not hold the same place and power in your personal perspective reality. So you can almost say the goggles or the glasses, the question of, well, how do I keep this state? That becomes a placeholder to curiously engage. It's an opportunity. And when you migrate from focusing on your problems to focusing on your opportunities, well, now you've taken the same physics that you use for creating problems and healing problems, and you're leveraging that to manifest an extraordinary life.
Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I want to hear more about this because I love figuring out how to manifest more effectively. So we'll be right back. Are you an Awakened Goddess Show insider? Each and every month, our members receive lots of fantastic perks, including behind-the-scenes conversations from the show, outrageously fun virtual happy hours, Angela Unscripted, where I shoot candid videos of me living the everyday goddess life, bonus meditations, powerful activations, and healing energy work with the guests, exclusive gifts and private readings, on-demand access to the show, plus an invite to join our private community. Visit our website today at theawakenedgoddess.com for more information. Now back to the show. Okay, so continuing this conversation about placeholders, this is like really, I'm really vibing on this. So just for clarification, how I was describing that feeling that I was having about all the excitement, that's not a placeholder. Is that correct?
Actually, it can be.
It can be
a placeholder. And this is an important distinction, because sometimes people will doorknob in that a placeholder is something negative that you want to change. A placeholder is any pattern of information that you are in relation to or in resonance with. Everything is you in relation to absolutely everything. So a placeholder can be an opportunity or a possibility or a potentiality or a state of being that you have set up in your reality that you think is not available. A placeholder can be something that you had access to at one time, and maybe in the present moment, you perceive yourself to be cut off from it. Because the question you asked was, well, sometimes I'm able to access it, and other times I get stuck in, reality.
Right. Yeah.
This is this is why I love to reference reality TV, because it's so not reality. Although it's the virtual reality is every bit as real as actual reality. It's all a function of
Yeah.
resonance. It's all a
Well,
function.
I'm sorry. I resonate with The Bachelor, so oh no. I just
Well,
that's like the only thing I watch on TV when it comes on, and I'm just like, oh geez. And I can see it, but
yeah, and at the same time, look at the joy and delight that you're experiencing from sharing your little secret fetish with a great show, according to you. And there's no shame
yeah.
in that. And this is the thing, we're programmed and conditioned shame and blame and regret and what we should do and what we could have done. And none of this is necessarily useful. This is how we
Hmm.
beat ourselves up. And the
Yeah.
physics of the integrity effect, simply stated, it's a physics of self-love. And self-love is crucial to the equation. And when we are loving ourselves, when we are compassionate toward ourselves, then then we have more love and more abundance and more flow available to give to others.
Hmm.
Women in particular, historically, we are very communal, and we're very nurturing, and we're very compassionate. And the one thread woven throughout history has been a tendency to give love without actually loving ourselves. And
Hmm.
as we are progressing more into the physics of the sacred feminine and the physics of connection, there is a reemergence of that sacred feminine, recognizing that self-love is pivotal to that equation. So if you
Yes.
love watching The Bachelor as a placeholder, as long as you know the difference between thinking that you need The Bachelor in order to feel complete, you are complete unto yourself, and that placeholder of The Bachelor is an extension of that completion. It's an expression of your own innate joy. And
Hmm.
they're hot, so why not?
Yeah. Yeah. It just it fuels that the what is it, the Prince Charming whole storyline.
Well, isn't that? I mean, the archetypes and the stories, because you've referenced stories a couple times, and I talk about we're so much more than our story in the integrity effect, and yet at the same time, stories are how we make sense of our reality. Stories as a series of linguistics woven together to describe the indescribable. There's archetypes encoded within the collective consciousness. So the Prince Charming archetype has a huge morphic field. It has a huge blueprint, so to speak, that is available for anyone and everyone to tap into. And so if you take that knowingness and then you realize, well, what happens if you're a woman that decides that you don't necessarily want to make the focus of your life finding a Prince Charming? Maybe you want to focus on having a career or traveling the world. Maybe you're going to put off having children. Well, suddenly you're not necessarily aligned with this blueprint that is serving to create a program that runs it at the level of a collective. And that can
Hmm.
create a sense of um, unbelonging and feeling like there's something
Yes.
wrong with you. And so these programs, these blueprints, these archetypal images, maps, morphic fields, however you want to call them, are very, very pervasive in our experience of reality. A lot of times I'll encounter students or clients that will say, I really want to change and I don't understand why it's so hard. I'm practicing the law of attraction. I'm putting, post-it notes up telling myself that I'm awesome and that I'm going to manifest money, and all I'm noticing is that I'm not, or all I'm noticing is the gap between what's on the mirror and what's showing up in my life. And I explain that a lot of times it's difficult to change our individual reality because of these blueprints or archetypes or morphic fields that are serving like an invisible hand, creating an outline for what we're going to experience in 3D. So understanding blueprints and changing the blueprints and realizing that we hold the power of that pen and we can create the outlines, we can color outside the lines, there are no lines, is a very, very liberating way to create and relate to your experience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with Prince Charming.
Right. And that's a beautiful segue into true authentic desires. You talk about that in your book. And I really want to talk about this because I think that there's well, okay, I'll speak for myself. Then everybody else can, whether they relate or not, we'll see. Back in, I'm still actually working on this. I had the belief, or for some reason I had this idea that I couldn't really want things or desire things. Like I had to reach these certain goals or milestones, or I had to jump through these hoops before I could really want or desire. And that I would allow myself to want those things because I don't know. I'm having a little trouble even communicating it, but there's this like I know there are things that I want, right? But I don't know that I am yet claiming those as okay to have. And I think that there are a lot of, especially women, that they want things, but they're not able to verbalize them out loud and say, I want the Prince Charming. I want to have it all. I want $3 million. They may have those desires inside, but they're not claiming it. What's your experience with that?
I agree, and thank you for your honesty. And you actually did a beautiful job communicating verbally as well as energetically what you're trying to get out. So I completely understand what you're
Lots
sharing.
Lots of arm movements.
Oh, I get it all. Your field actually changed while you were articulating that. This is what I love about, while language can be heady to me, the language of heart-centered awareness, words are carrier waves for transformation, and language can move us into a different resonance. It's sound healing at its finest, and our body bioholograms respond to every single intonation. So in any event, I agree with you. There's been, if we go back to what I referenced a little bit earlier about women are, by our very nature, we're very compassionate, we're very giving. However, there's been a disproportionate giving without receiving. There's been these blueprints or morphic fields that have actually subjugated true authentic power to some extent because they've served like surrogate power structures. They don't follow the mathematical symmetry of love. So if you take our natural tendency to be very loving and compassionate, then that has been deviated into a contorted grid or template that says loving self is selfish. Loving self and going after what you want is selfish. And that has then led to a series of subsequent fields that make it difficult for, I'll say women and men, because I don't want any men that are listening to feel excluded if they have a hard time going after what they want. But there are programs running in both genders that lead us away from the true callings of our hearts, from our true authentic desires. Even the word desire, and I use that acronym intentionally because in some spiritual realms, the word desire has been contorted and distorted. You're supposed to be desireless. And it's like, wait a minute, we are consciousness. We are here to create. And if consciousness has one purpose, it's to create novelty. And that novelty doesn't begin to spin without desire. Desire is the fire of the heart, and it is the most important impetus in consciousness. It's what begins the spiral and spirals and is woven through everything. So yes, and being aware that there's still something in the way. There's still something preventing you from fully embodying your true authentic desires. Now, I do make a distinction, and I think this is important, and I'll share it with our viewers because it may shift things up just by virtue of watching. Sometimes I'm asked, what is the difference between a true authentic desire and maybe a program or a morphic field that's running in the collective that's been conditioned into our consciousness? And it's a great distinction to make because a lot of times we don't even know what our true authentic desires are. Maybe
Right.
we've been programmed to think we want to marry Prince Charming when in fact we really want to go to Japan and make underwater baskets.
Yeah.
Like, right? So who knows? Sometimes it can be very confusing. To me, a true authentic desire is a desire that it literally spirals or it wells up from the field of the heart. It's an inward movement, and it's not a push, but it's almost like it wants to open and blossom.
Hmm.
I refer to it as seeds of love's completion. And there's this knowing without knowing how we know. We have this
Hmm.
innate sense of familiarity. It just feels right, true, and correct, not from an intellectual, judgmental, moralistic standard, but it just feels familiar. And so there's this familiarity to it, and yet at the same time, we may have absolutely no clue how to go about manifesting that. And this is where trust, and this is where understanding the power of commanding field flow, which I teach in the MJoy seminars, is so helpful because contained within us are all the ingredients that we need in order to manifest absolutely everything. We're made of the same physics that the universe utilizes in order to create everything. We're that,
Yeah.
and that is us. And so, trusting that when a true authentic desire begins to well up, honoring the cues, the placeholders, the synchronicities that begin to emerge can lead us to the full blossoming of that expression of that manifestation. Now, when the blocks come up, and I'll use the word block for, sometimes a block is like a box, right? So it's our reality box. But when these emotions come up, when these fears come up, when these programs come up, and they may all come up as one and the same, that's where placeholders become really, really useful. All right, where is this pattern coming from? I track with you that it's not even your pattern. Like, it tracks
Hmm.
back into your family lineage. Some of it is your mom stuff. Some of it is you've taken on her patterning, and so you can send it back. Um, there is no time and space, and everything is in the hologram. You change one point, you change all the points. The
Yes,
other
and I love that. I love that we can make such a tiny, tiny, in a very small change, and it will change. It'll ripple out and have such a dramatic effect. Not even where we can see it, but much further out. I love that.
Yeah. So, curious, how do you feel as a result of articulating what you perceive to be a problem?
A little awkward. Yeah.
Why do you feel awkward?
Um, it's kind of like I have a foot in both sides in two worlds, like the expansion and the contraction. So it's kind of like I'm awkward standing between those two. Weird ways of describing things, but
I completely get it. So, what if it's not the polarity? What if it's not expansion or contraction? What if they are one and the same? What if it's
Mm,
integration? Because
yes.
truly, the physics entails and requires expansion and compression in order for manifestation to occur. If we talk about the counter-rotating torsion fields of the heart, um, this spiraling creates a certain amount of inertia as well as momentum. It's like the eye of a tornado, the eye of the storm. It's always really still, even though there's all this like circulating energy around it. Well, our heart fields and the way that manifestation occurs, it's the same way. So we
Mm,
need the compression and the expansion. That's the physics of manifestation. But when our mind says, no, I'm either going to be small or I'm going to be big, which is another way to describe it. It isn't. They're both. It's the yin and the yang. So what happens if you allow for those seemingly discrete constructs to integrate, and you recognize that it's almost like I'm getting the image of, if we're going to play out in a swimming pool and we're gonna springboard off of a diving board, we've got to bounce down in order to expand out. We
Yes.
need both. We need
Mm-hmm.
both. And then the awkwardness might just be you got a little bit vulnerable on a show with a bunch of people watching. And I'll just invite you to consider something I think you already know, which is
Yeah.
vulnerability is power. It's
Yeah.
power.
No, I put it out on the show all the time. But, I mean, we all have our more vulnerable spots, I think. And to be completely transparent, when I get a little discombobulated about communicating, like it's like I can feel this stuff inside, but my mouth does not necessarily, it doesn't come out. And then I get a little, but yeah.
Well, A, you articulated it beautifully.
Thank you.
B, there is a field in the Amjoy teachings, field 112 in Little Book of Big Potentials, which is
All right.
all about true authentic expression. It's about allowing for the true authentic desires to well up from the heart and then to be verbally articulated. And a verbal articulation is a movement in consciousness. So sometimes just putting it out there can actually create the momentum that allows for the pattern to begin to reconfigure. My sense is it's already different. There's some things back here. It's almost like other people's programs around, like you can't have it all, or you'll be a BITCH if you're these are all just programs, and they run. Being aware of when they run and then not letting them run you can change everything.
Yes. Yeah, and I love that you bring that awareness to just communicating something, because there is something about the transformation that happens in allowing something to come up and then being willing to vocalize it, because that is that resonance. And I can think back about like certain things in my life, that how challenging it was to just say something out loud, and the process that we go through of because what we say, it's like we manifest. And so I love that you bring attention to that. Yeah.
It's so important to authentically express our truth. I think sometimes too, beyond the fact that we might be programmed not to speak our truth or to get in line and conform in a way that's not comfortable at all, what if we speak our truth at 11:56 a.m. and at 12:03 our truth is different? And so being able to recognize that our truth, like consciousness, is very flexible, and what might be true for us in one moment may change over time. Now, I'm not talking about alternate facts. What I'm talking about is what we are truly in integrity with. And this is different from conveniently misappropriating facts in order to fit a story that might make your image look better. I'm talking about living vibrantly from the field of the heart. That is an aspect of living in integrity, true authentic expression, because we all want to be seen and heard. And seeing and hearing one another is important, but true authentic expression is really about you in relation to you. You seeing you, you honoring you, you listening to you. And it's less important if I hear you or if your audience hears you. We're never going to hear you the way that you intend. We're always going to hear you through our filters.
Yes. Well, and I love that my audience, I have raving fans, and I love that you all, my audience members, hear me through a beautiful filter. So thank you.
Through resonance, your audience sees themselves as you and sees you as a unique individual as well. It's a beautiful symmetry of love. And so what I'm not saying is that you're not connecting to your audience. What I'm pointing to is that, let's say I'm teaching a seminar and there's 200 people. Well, there's going to be 200 seminars going on in any given moment. And if I am wed to everybody hearing exactly what I intend to say, I'm giving my power away. Whereas if I'm truly embodying my heart and embodying my true authentic self, then I'm going to congruently express what's moving through me. They're more likely to hear what I intend.
Beautiful. So we're going to take another quick break. And then when we come back, I'm wondering if we can do some sort of exercise. Is that okay? Have you created vision boards, listened to meditations, and read books on how the law of attraction works, yet you're still not where you want to be? That's why I created the Envision Experience, a revolutionary and simple 28-day process for powerful, quantum-level dream manifesting. Over 4 weeks, you'll get laser-focused guidance, accountability, support, plus a powerful personalized movie to help you envision and embody your dreams into reality. You can find out more at theawakenedgoddess.com/envision-experience. Now back to the show. Okay, so I'm excited to do an exercise. What do you have something up your sleeve that you'd like to walk us through?
Well, when you asked the question about exercise, I tuned into some of the listeners and the viewers, and I could see people going, no, I don't want to exercise. I hate being on an exercise program. And so this is why in all of my books, and I've actually written 4 books up to this point, I talk about practical play. Rather than there being exercises at the end of every chapter, it's practical play, because when we're playing, we're naturally in the field of our hearts. And when we're playing, there's no doing it correctly or getting an A or getting an F. And right. I define play as potential love awaiting you and your recognition. So it's an acronym, PLAY. So we're going to do perhaps a practical play. And I'll preface that with there's no right or wrong way to engage. We're going to play like we were little kids. And hopefully we didn't push anyone out of the sandbox, because there is no sand and there is no box. It's just infinite consciousness potential, infinite love waiting for our recognition. So I thought what might be useful is to help our viewers make a subtle, albeit profound, distinction between being in the heart and not being in the heart. Truly, the field of the heart, being in the heart, that's our natural state. I liken it to if we were fish, and granted we're not, although I am because I'm a Pisces, but if we were fish and we were swimming out in the Mediterranean Ocean or the Pacific Ocean, since you're in Portland, if we were out in the ocean and you decided to do an interview, and you went to the fish and you said, hey, how is it that you breathe underwater? And the fish would look at you and they'd say, who is this crazy lady? Like, this is just the way things are. Okay. So if we took those same fish that we were trying to interview and we swept them up in a net, and then we hoisted them up above the surface of the water into mid-air, what would happen? The fish would get constricted, they'd get tense, they would start suffocating. And then they would say, oh, I get it now. Put us back in the water and we'll tell you what it's like to breathe underwater, because now we have a reference for what is not our natural state. And so being in the field of the heart is like being a fish underwater. It's truly our natural state, and we don't really notice it until we notice what takes us out of our hearts. And then what tends to occur is we feel tense, we feel anxious, we feel constricted. So let's just playfully, right now, I want to invite everybody to think, notice, sense, perceive, or feel into something. Oh, you thought we were going into your heart. We're not. Think about something that's going on in your life that you consider a problem, a stressor. It could be a relationship. It could be a job. It could be what's happening at the political level. It could be anything that you are in relation to in your personal perspective reality. And give that problem a location in your field. We're actually going to give that problem as a placeholder, a location. We're going to give it a place. So I'm going to put mine out in front of me. I'm just going to tag it like I would put a yellow Post-it. Okay. And you've got yours and everybody else on. All right. So now bring your consciousness into that problem, into that pattern, into that placeholder. Like if it was a spiral, I want you to go straight into the center of the spiral and tell me what you notice. and I'm just going to use you, if you don't mind, as the example, like what thoughts, sensations, feelings, perceptions, what do you notice as you move your consciousness into the problem?
I feel pressure pushing me down. I feel constricted at my heart, like things are tightening up. Um, just yeah, like tension, little minute tension throughout my body, like starting from my head and working into my jaw and just kind of moving down. That's what I'm
Super.
noticing.
And that's totally perfect. Okay. Now I want to invite you, as well as all of the viewers, to gently or not gently bring your awareness into the field of the heart. And this area of the field of the heart can span anywhere from really the throat chakra all the way down to the base of the pelvic floor. What we're really looking for is just dropping into a centering of the container of the physical body. Because the field of the heart, it's more than the physical heart. It's even more than the heart chakra. It's absolutely everything. It's where your individuality meets your transpersonal consciousness. Okay? And as you are in the field of your heart, I invite you to notice what thoughts, sensations, feelings, or perceptions you're experiencing in relation to the placeholder. What's different now?
So the first thing I noticed was that more expanded feeling, and it kept expanding, and I felt bliss. And then it kept building, and then I was feeling myself like tear up, and it was just like really this growing. Oh, and the other thing was I got this image of me being cradled as a baby.
And that's like being cradled in the hands of the love of universal consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
So super awesome how quick and easy that was. Now let's go one step further, because I like to keep it really practical. From
Yes.
the field of the heart, what do you notice about that placeholder? If you can even find it in the same way.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's really a problem. It's just a scenario. Yeah,
Kind
but
of
there's not like
interesting, not interesting. Not quite like a new
yeah.
episode of The Bachelor.
No. No, but it just doesn't like it feels like there isn't that energy, the negative, heavy, tight energy around it. It's just like an is. It's neutrality. There's neutral. Yeah, neutrality around
And
it.
what you've described is one of the, I call it a side effect of heart-centered awareness. That's my background in the pharmaceutical industry for
Yeah.
more than a decade. But one of the most beautiful side effects of heart-centered awareness, beyond accessing our joy, is that there is an aspect of neutrality that occurs. Now, neutrality doesn't mean we don't care about stuff. Neutrality just means there's no polarized charge keeping us shackled and locked into states of polarity and the limitations of so-called duality. When there's no charge, our whole nervous system isn't in fight or flight response. We are actually free to flow into what may occur to us in the next moment. So you have much more leverage. You have much more wiggle room to interact with the pattern. Now, that was a simple example. Yet that simple example, if that is all you get out of anything in any of the MJOY teachings, it's a holofractal game changer, because becoming aware of when we leave our hearts, that the moment we notice we're out, we're mired in the cesspool of the placeholder, then all we have to do is come back. And I didn't necessarily guide the reader or the viewers into how do you get into your heart, because I am maintaining that everybody on this call knows how to do that. Everybody on this call knows how to breathe. Sometimes we forget to breathe, and then what happens? And so heart-centered awareness is our natural state. We all know how to occupy that space. The question becomes, how frequently do we move our awareness away from recognizing it? And the moment we recognize, we've bailed on our home, we can come back. Because home it's everywhere. And I mean, at the truest sense, and I unpack this more extensively in the seminars, the field of the heart is everywhere. So the field of the heart holographically is even in the problem. It's even in the placeholder. But being able to move your consciousness into a different space, into the space of grace of the field of the heart of completion without the filters, gives you ability to navigate through a problem or a condition or a placeholder without blurry lenses. Because you saw, I think it was William Blake said that if the lens of awareness were immaculate, then man, and he meant to say woman too, man and woman would see themselves as they truly are, infinite. And that's when you get into the field of the heart and you're kind of neutral. Neutral means all is available. So there's no need to have a charge. There's no need to grab onto something. There's no need to hold on. You let go. All is allowed. All is available. All is possible. And that is the heart of the Joy teachings.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness, Melissa Joy, thank you so much for this beautiful and powerful conversation. I know that this conversation is really going to impact so many people in just, what we've talked about so much rich information, and I love the experience, and I can still feel it in my body. So thank you for bringing that to us today.
Well, I want to thank you for the beautiful questions and for your beautiful essence and your willingness to come along in my favorite conversation. So it's a delight to be in the conversation with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to meet your friends in the audience and to be able to share what is available for everyone. And it's just an honor to meet you, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Yes, I know that we have so much more to talk about. So y'all that are watching and listening, you're going to see Melissa Joy again in a future episode because we have so much more to dig into. So until then,
stay in your heart.
Yes, stay in your heart. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Awakened Goddess Show. I hope you enjoyed today's guest and got something you can start using in your life right away. For more spiritual insights and to listen to more episodes, subscribe to The Awakened Goddess Show at theawakenedgoddess.com and discover wisdom that'll change your life.